Alright, hello again. This is Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College with lecture number 16 of 19 for the 152-147 Relational Database Development class for the spring 2016 semester at Blackhawk Technical College. I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations from Murock's MySQL 2nd edition, which is the textbook for the class. As mentioned, I'm up to Chapter 16, which is on triggers and events. Now, as we get into this, the big difference between triggers and events, triggers are basically based off of when something happens. Okay, for instance, maybe I work for a hardware store and there's something set up at the hardware store that if let's say that a certain screw, if it falls beneath 500 of them in stock, that immediately an order for 5,000 more is given. So that falling below the 500 would trigger, hence the name, an action happening. I remember years ago, I being at McDonald's, I was very many years ago, and talking to a guy and asking them, and it was during the time when the Big Mac commercial was out, 2 all beef patties and all the other stuff they said. And I asked the guy, I said, how do you keep track of this stuff? How do you know how many you've sold, etc.? And they said that basically every time they ring in an order, and let's say it's for Big Macs, for example, they decrement the number of beef patties that they have in stock by 2. It's automatically done for them. And there is a signal that was sent out when it gets below a certain number that it would trigger an event that it would order more of the patties. So that's triggers, and again, we'll talk about them in a little bit more in just a second. But events are something I started to mention before, and I did it in the wrong context, because events have something to do with timing. All right, I mentioned before that you might want to have something that happens at 3 o'clock every morning for the company you work for, because there's little traffic, let's say, that happens during that time. Well, it's a similar type of thing with an event. So we'll talk about how to create triggers that execute. Notice you can create triggers that execute either before or after you do an insert, an update, or a delete. So you might want to do a before trigger to check and make sure that what you're about to do, you're able to do. You might want to do an after trigger to make sure that what you just tried to do was indeed successfully done. All right, we'll talk about how to either enable or disable an event scheduler, how to create events that execute as a specified time, or maybe at a recurring interval, maybe again every day at this time, or once a week at this time, etc. We'll describe how a row level trigger works, how a trigger can be used to enforce data consistency or to insert rows into an audit table, and distinguish between a one-time event and a recurring event. This is a short chapter. So again, the big thing with a create trigger is, do you want to do it before or do you want to do it after an event takes place? So as it says, this is a trigger that corrects mixed state case names. All right. So what it's doing there, it's saying before you do the update, make sure that the state name is in all uppercase. And they mentioned there you can use the old and new keywords to get and set values. So the old would get the current value. The new would set the current value. There's the new right there. All right, here's an update statement. So notice, a lot of times when people are putting things into a database, they're lazy. And maybe they don't want to put in things in uppercase, but they want to make sure that when they get put into the database, they are in uppercase. All right. Here's a trigger that, as it says right here, it validates line item amounts. All right. So what does that mean? You might want to check to make sure that what in there is a number, or what's in there is positive, or whatever. This all goes back again to that idea of data validation. Now, an audit table, this is a very, very important thing in here right now, just so you realize it with an audit table. What happens is when you are, whether you're doing transactions or individual things, every single time you try to do something to a database, it's going to either A, succeed, or B, fail. What you can do with an audit table is you can keep track of every attempted insert, update, or delete that happens in a table. And you can also keep track of the success or failure of that attempt. The reason that an audit table is important is if you're working on your database and somehow the database gets corrupted, you can use the audit table. Let's say it's been a while since you've done a backup on the database. You can use the audit table rather to help rebuild the database. All right, here's a couple after triggers, and you'll notice these use both new and old. Again, this is all I'm talking about these, and I'm not spending a lot of time on them, as you've noticed. All right, dropping a trigger, you can check again to see whether or not it exists. All right, show variables like event scheduler. Okay, so let's see if we've even got one that's like this. So what I want to do is I want to grab that statement that says show variables like event scheduler. Oops. Come on. Copy. Okay, it's not working. Copy. And we'll come back over to here and we'll paste it in. And it says we have it and it's turned off. So we do have an event scheduler that's set up on here. It is not currently activated, but we have one that's there. So if we want to turn it on, we set global event scheduler equal on. I'm not going to do that now. I mean, it would just give me a message that it worked. Then I can schedule things to happen at regular intervals. There's a one-time event, but quite often you'll want a recurring event every 1 month, as an example. So I can be very granular too. I can say every 1 month on this day at this time type of an idea if I want to do that. All right, and that's pretty much it for the chapter. I realized this was going to be a very, very short lecture, probably less than 10 minutes, and it is. So just so you see this, because this is my last lecture for tonight, what's left now are chapters 17, 18, and 19. That's all that's left. Right, so we just finished 16. 17 is an introduction to database administration. 18 is how to secure a database, and 19 is how to back up and restore a database. None of them are particularly long chapters, but I want to go back and reread the material before I lecture on it, so I will do that tomorrow.